And welcome this afternoon to PNW BOCES Integrated SSELA Presents, introducing our brand new Grade 3 curriculum. My name is Greg Fredericks, and I am the Regional Coordinator for Social Studies and Blended Learning here at Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, and I'm very excited to be joined by two of my co-authors and colleagues and collaborators, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves. Go ahead, Linda.
Hi, my name is Linda Brandon. I'm the Instructional Technology Consultant on the SSELA project. I've been working on this project since its inception.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy McGuire. I'm the Social Studies Consultant for SSELA, and I'm a retired teacher and mentor coordinator from Cornwall Central School District.
And again, I cannot stress enough how instrumental these two have been in really putting together what we think is the best Grade 3 curriculum, the most framework-aligned Grade 3 curriculum, and the most student-centered curriculum that New York State has to offer. And the purpose of our gathering today is really just to highlight and showcase some of the big shifts that are occurring with the new Grade 3. As many of you may have seen, we have currently one unit up, and we'll talk a little bit about the unit structures in a second. But the rest of the units will be coming online in sequential order over the next month or so. And so before we do jump in, what we are going to ask from all of you is just to share a little bit of information about who you are. This is going to be really helpful, one, to help us understand who is joining us today in this webinar. And secondly, to also help us to kind of think through our further work, because we are actively tweaking and changing the upcoming units based on feedback that we are receiving from teachers. And so one of the things we would ask you to do is to go ahead and jump into the chat and just fill out that webinar form, which again, we're going to look at in real time. I'll repost that again. And again, it's wonderful to have so many teachers with us today. I know many of you folks are very, very interested about the changes that are upcoming. We are only together for about 30 minutes today, and so we'll really be hitting some of the bigger, broader highlights. We do have some upcoming trainings that we will also be sharing out, so that if you want to take a deeper dive into Grade 3, you can certainly participate in that. We're also going to be asking for people to just actively reach out over the course of the year. This will not be by any means the last third grade webinar of the year. And what we've done in Grade 3 this year is going to be really kind of showcasing and highlighting what we will be doing going forward in our continual cycles of revisions at later grade levels. So again, wonderful to see Assistant Soups here with us today, third grade teachers, directors of social studies, and really just want to go down here and highlight maybe some of the questions, because we're going to try to, again, encapsulate as many of these today. This is going to be us kind of doing a lot of information pushing out to all of you. But what we are going to do at some point in time is put together an FAQ that in the fall will get teased out, and we'll take these questions, we'll try to bunch them together and answer those questions for you. The other really nice thing that I can share with all of you is that the current iteration of Grade 3 will stay online through June 30th of this year. And so for those of you who may be saying, well, I've taught Grade 3 for a number of years, I like to utilize the resources that are there, you'll have the opportunity to continue to use those resources through June 30th this year and begin to borrow or pull from some of the new resources, or you can certainly jump into the deep end with our support and help and take on the brand new curriculum. And so here to learn side-by-side comparisons, well, we can certainly talk through that. And if you do attend our deeper dive, we'll definitely be showing you that. What was the reason for the change in the curriculum? We'll be talking about that today as well. Are the links working this year? Yes, they are. Will be more fun and more on a student's level. Learn about the updates and highlights to share with our principals and teachers, and looking forward to integration. So these are great questions. And again, we would just ask that as you go through and you take time with the resources, that you do give us that feedback. I did also notice, and one thing I will make a point of to share out, is that some of you surfaced the idea of links and broken links. You know, one of the things about the SSELA curriculum is that we do utilize a large number of external resources. It's one of the ways that we continue to offer the curriculum at the price point that we do and make it affordable, right, to the 250 districts or so that we support. One thing I will tell you, and you will see this in the new grade 3 curriculum, is that many of our resources are now internal resources. And so in a few minutes, Linda's going to talk through the videos that she developed. Traditionally, we've linked out to external resources, external websites ranging from YouTube to PBS. But Linda actually designed and curated a lot of the tech resources, and so they exist and are proprietary to SSELA, which not only means that we're able to tweak them and make them specific to the curriculum, but their reliability is greatly improved because we're not using third-party providers. So on your screen, you'll see the plan for the new upgraded and updated grade 3. Unit 1 geography is available now. It's located on the toolbar right next to the other units, and it's designated as new unit 1. The United States of America, which is a much larger, more robust unit than the one it replaces, will be coming next Friday. And then sequentially, Brazil, China, and Kenya will be released in good order. The one thing I can tell you about those units 2 through 5 that you see up there is that they are going to be much more comparable. Speaking to the question of why did we do this? Well, one of the things that we saw within the curriculum and the way that it had been originally designed was that there was not the opportunities to point and to lean into similarities and differences in countries in the way that the framework calls for. And so going forward, what we're going to have teachers be able to do is look at the United States in terms of developing student capacity around understanding the geography of the United States, the economics of the United States, the government of the United States, and the culture of the United States, and then using that as a strict jump-off point to look at similarities and differences in all of the subsequent countries that are explored in a much more cohesive and much more intuitive way than the curriculum that it is replacing. Also want to point out, Unit 6 will be a country template, meaning that if you serve a large population of immigrants from another country or a large indigenous population, you'll have the ability with some recommendations to choose a country other than Brazil, China, or Kenya. And then our last unit will be on human rights, I Can Make a Difference, which will support the initiative that the state put out last year, really challenging and asking schools how they were teaching generally about the Holocaust, but more specifically about human rights. And so we're going to unpack that in a really developmental and an appropriate way for students.
So as we set out on our task to revise this curriculum, I want to say first that one thing was very much in mind, and that was giving students a sense of the practices that they should be beginning to refine, but also to provide them with more grade level appropriate work and make it fun for them. So the purpose of grade 3 is meant to give students a greater understanding and appreciation of different cultures around the world. And it is meant to be comparative in nature. And that's why, as we set out to organize this, we made sure that each unit was comprised of 5 similar lessons. The structure of the unit is very much parallel. Now, they'll have different activities in for each of the countries because there are certain natural differences in those, but it will be grounded in geography, economics, government, culture, and literature. So the bones of the intent will remain the same because that's been defined in the framework, but it's going to look very different. And I hope today we spend some time looking at that.
One of the questions that came up also as we were kind of scrolling through and you folks were completing that and I was looking at it in real time is why the shifts? And besides the shifts that Nancy just highlighted and the idea that we really wanted these units to feel cohesive and we wanted teachers to be able to have students see and think and wonder, right, about what they saw, it was also the idea that the state's requirements are changing for what a student needs to demonstrate to be competent in social studies. Social studies, right, does not currently have an elementary or a middle school test. But for those of you that supervise K through 12 experiences, you know that the Global 2 Regents and the US Regents exam are far more sophisticated than the exams that they replace. And speaking to what Nancy just mentioned, they dig in much deeper to skill development and practice development. And so traditionally, social studies has been driven simply by content, and it has taken a back seat, right? Content has taken the primary seat, and the practices and skills associated with that were pushed to the side. The new Regents exams require students to balance both of those aspects in order to be successful. These are also the same practices and skill sets that we see in ELA in the grade 3 through 8 exams, as well as the new science exam, right, at the 5th grade level, which requires our students to be really critical, use analysis, use contextualization, compare and contrast. These are the things that are highlighted within the social studies practices and what is going to be very pronounced within these new lessons. So again, what we are going to see, and these are the shifts that you're going to see, and I noticed that somebody is asking questions, and that's wonderful. What we're going to do is we are going to post this video up on the website, and we will put out an FAQ once we distill and take in all the questions and kind of group them. But we want your questions. So, you know, honestly, you can always reach out to us. Myself and my colleague Jessica BLA are always here, but we're always also available by email. So as you do jump into the new curriculum, questions, wonderings, constructive feedback that you have, feel free to reach out. So again, you're going to see the foundational social studies practices. There are 6 social studies practices that New York State says should be actively and explicitly being taught on a daily basis in our social studies classroom spaces. And again, as Nancy mentioned, besides the literature component that's within each country, we always tie back these lessons to the ELA Next Gen standards specifically, so that our elementary teachers, our 3rd grade teachers can see the connection between what they're doing in literacy block and what they are teaching in social studies.
You want to say?
So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to have a little bit of a showcase of some of the shifts that we are going forward. And that we'll be looking at going forward, specifically around specific skill development, students working with materials designed to sharpen their skills and build content knowledge. You'll also notice just within the geography unit that we launched, there is a balance between physical, tactile resources and materials and lessons that students are doing, and digital resources that Linda's really led the charge on creating. So we have students doing things like cutting out the continents and moving the continents around in real time and placing them, mixed with digital jump-off platforms and the opportunity to experience technology and integrated technology that can either be used individually with students, in small groups, or in a whole class experience.
And Greg, if I could,
Sure, please.
We put great effort and great thought into these kinds of activities because we wanted students to be able to show you what they've learned rather than simply us, the teachers, directing that instruction and then checking on them by testing them. We wanted them to be able to show it throughout.
Yeah, we've received questions, right? You know, there was a question that I received that was like, where's the multiple choice question test for the geography unit? You're going to see multiple different kinds of assessment, lots of project-based learning, lots of collaborative work, and lots of progress monitoring-based assessment, not just, you know, the end at the end of a unit. So we're going to be mixing up the different ways that we're going to ask you and challenge teachers to assess students in real time and allow students to demonstrate their knowledge. Now we're going to actually look at some of these resources and highlight them for you.
Okay, so this is Linda here. We're showcasing here the 4 videos that we have created specifically for this curriculum. We will, of course, still be using YouTube videos and videos that are found with outside vendors. but we wanted to really tailor the content to our specific needs. So we built 4 separate videos. My colleagues and I wrote the scripts together, and we spent a lot of time editing these. And basically, they give a student a look at the capitals of each of these 4 countries and what we can learn about the culture and the government and the economics and just about everything by looking at these capitals. So they're very visual, and like I said before, they're tailored to the needs of your curriculum and your students. We don't have to tell you to start at 2.6 seconds and end at 5 minutes into it. You can watch the video from beginning to end. They're in kid-friendly language. They're not that long. So we hope you enjoy them. And as you watch
And
them,
very visually stimulating.
let us know how you like them. And, because they're ours, we can edit them. So we appreciate your feedback.
Now, Nancy's going to talk a little bit about cause and effect.
Okay, so one of the things we wanted, we know that most of you are used to teaching cause and effect, and as sort of this is the cause, and then what follows is the effect. And when we started to look at geography, we wanted to go a little bit beyond just a graphic organizer and see if students could learn about, after looking at a map, if they could figure out what is the effect of that actual physical feature. So this is an example of us seeing if students can apply what they had learned in Unit 1, which is a straight geography unit, and then they get to Unit 2, Lesson 1, and they talk specifically about the United States. This particular map comes from Unit 1, Lesson 3, where they're talking about landforms. So they've learned about landforms. Now we're going to ask them, if you were a farmer, in what part of the United States would you most likely settle, or would you be most likely to settle? And we want to invite discussion. There isn't just one straight answer. They may choose to live near a river because they can transport their goods. They may choose to live in a plain once they've learned about plains, because that's a flat land that's more suitable for farming. And then we go on with several other scenarios. If you were a skier, snowboarder, or a mountain biker, where would you want to visit? If you owned a sailboat, where would you like to live? And so it's really checking to see if they understand the impact or the effect of certain physical features that they come in contact with throughout their daily lives or on vacations or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, cause and effect is also one of the relationships that's really teased out in both Regents exams. And the one thing we wanted to be very deliberate about is we did not want this to feel like it's test prep junior for third graders.
Many Regents.
But students do need to have the basis and the understanding of these different historical relationships, because they are so pronounced. And the one thing we hear from high school teachers the most is that they do not have students coming in necessarily with those skill acquisitions. They sometimes come in with the content, but the content has to be retaught anyway. And so having a real firm grounding in this, going all the way back to elementary school, is critical. Continuity and change is another one that's going to be really teased out, and it's going to be teased out across the different countries. We also built in lots of particular questioning structures, and Nancy's going to talk more about the questioning structures in a moment. But things like our producers and consumers lesson, which is going to be in our upcoming US unit to be released next Friday, really looks at the shifting demographics of the jobs that people have. Students are going to look at different graphs. They're going to learn about what do we produce, what do we consume. They're going to learn about different kinds of jobs. And we are a country that is changing, right? Over time, we've become less agrarian, right? We've become less about industrialization and producing things, and we've become more about consumers and services. And so when students look at these different graphs and they see these different images, they're going to naturally come to questions. And one of the things we're going to ask teachers to engage in to preload for fourth grade, which is going to look at some of that history, is to understand that over time, right, us as producers and consumers, we have changed, right? Some things have stayed the same, others have changed, as well as the different roles and jobs that people have held. Going into geographic context, this is one that is critically important for students to develop. And again, as Nancy mentioned, this year leans very heavily into geography. What we heard from third grade teachers when we surveyed them as we were building this is that many teachers were finding that their second grade students, right, because geography tends to get kind of couched towards the end of the year in second grade, they were coming into third grade without those basic skills. And so we've built in some redundancy, but we've built in engaging redundancy. So students will get a firm understanding of geography. They'll look at things like latitude. They'll come to understand the purpose of the continents and the oceans, right? How that influences things like climate. And they'll do that in creating a world map. And that's the way that we're going to build the very basic backbone of geographic context. And then Nancy, do you want to talk a little bit about our culture wheel example and how that builds on that?
Very quickly. So Linda, I think it was, cleverly designed this image of a culture wheel. And what we did was take the notion that comes right from the framework, where we live affects how we live. And in the center, you can see we identified some of the physical features students are likely to encounter, and then they will fill in the wheel by saying, well, because I live in an area where it snows in the winter, this is how it affects my recreation. Or if I live in an area that has a temperate climate, we're more apt to have farming here. So once again, it is showing cause and effect, but it is also showing students that where you live affects how you live. And in social studies, as we move on through the grade levels, that's referred to as geographic context. It is a skill that students struggle with, and we wanted to try to introduce that at an early level so they begin to conceptualize it. Okay, go, Greg.
There was a question about editing the different resources. You're more than welcome to. Once you download the images, you can certainly make them your own. Thank you for your feedback.
Okay, so here's another example of, we as the consultants looking for materials that are going to be applicable and going to be appropriate for grade 3 and not always being able to find them. So we are creating our own resources. This is a custom map that we've made, custom maps to show United States imports and exports, and we have these maps for all of the countries that we cover. And this gives students the opportunity to have different means of gathering and interpreting information and using evidence to make claims and to draw conclusions. So we have quite a lot of these. We have infographics, we have a lot of maps, we have a lot of graphics where students are going to have to pull these apart, figure out how to use them, figure out what they mean, learn how to read a key. Really important these days that students know how to interpret information that they find online. And we are actually, preparing them for that very important skill by creating graphics that they, as third graders, can understand, and that they can then make claims about, draw conclusions based on what they see. Go ahead, Nan.
I was just going to say, and what we want them to do is learn how to make a claim about the topic of either, in this case, it's a graph, it might be an infographic, information that's on an infographic, make a claim and then find the evidence to support that claim within the graph. In some cases, it's a photograph. In some cases, it's an infographic. But this is a skill, once again, that students are going to see more and more. And we're very grateful that Linda is able to take Greg's and my social studies ideas and the concepts that we really want kids to drill home with, and then turn it into something fun for students.
And as you mentioned that, Nancy, I just wanted to transition, and I know you're going to speak to this slide, but one of the things that we want students to do is to ask the questions and drive a lot of this learning. And so many of you, as we were looking at the names we'd registered for today, many of you have come to implementation trainings and deeper dives, and you've seen that over the last couple of years, we've utilized See, Think, Wonder as one of our inquiry models with great success, and we've gotten very good feedback from teachers around it. And so that is going to be one of the main ways that we're going to unpack that. But Nancy, do you want to talk quickly about that?
One of the things we've done to sort of modify the idea of what do you see, what do you think, what do you wonder, rather than simply giving them that graphic organizer and letting them pull information from it, for those students that may need a little guidance or need a little focusing, we've added scaffolding questions that help them. For example, if you see here, ask students to think about any patterns they notice on the maps and record it on the chart. Ask students what they wonder about the maps. And then there's a little more prompting for the teachers. Ask students to engage in see, think, wonder, look for patterns, and then go back and look at the physical map. So we're really trying to scaffold some of these skills so that as they get towards the end of the year or towards the middle of the year, if you're lucky enough to have students that rise to the occasion, then they can begin to do that independently because they will self-regulate and ask those questions themselves. Okay.
Our last resource that we're just going to highlight really quickly is, again, going to the idea of making claims and supporting with evidence. For those of you, again, that are familiar with the Regents exams, right, and are familiar with how much social studies manifests on the grade 3 through 8 ELA exams, as well as the new science exams, or exam singular, sorry. One of the things that students are being actively asked to do, right, beginning in 3rd grade, is really to make claims and support with evidence, right? We call it writing like a historian when it comes to social studies spaces. And so what we've, again, been very deliberate about is having students gain the ability to be detectives, right? And so teachers in most lessons are going to be able to ask those prompting questions, utilizing things like see, think, wonder, utilizing specific questioning techniques, utilizing, again, resources. You can see the infographic here. We affectionately call it our United States trading card, and really giving students the opportunities to look at different kinds of data, look at different kinds of infographics, make sense of what those different things mean, because they do show up more commonly in print media and digital media today. And so our students are going to have to blend that idea of looking at traditional text, which does still show up on all of those exams we just mentioned, including the social studies Regents, but also looking at how data and information can also be shown in different ways. And so lots of exit tickets built in. Again, that idea of progress monitoring rather than simply having summative assessments. One of the things that we saw and one of the things we heard from elementary teachers is that they would get to the end of the unit or the end of a lesson, they would give a summative assessment, and they would find that there were gaps in the students' learning. Instead, we're going to challenge teachers to build in much more small, right, targeted assessment strategies like an exit ticket, and that way they can actually look at student growth and progress over time and can then return back, right, and reteach something the next day rather than having to go back at the end of a unit.
And as a goal that we mentioned earlier, it's going to be very student-centered curriculum. So although we are providing some maps and some infographics, students will be creating a lot of assets themselves too. So it's very, they will be content creators. They will not just be consuming content, but they will be creating content as well. And we'll do our best to provide you templates to make that task easy for you with your 3rd graders.
And so we can't thank you enough for making the time. You know, when we go to schedule these webinars, what we generally hear from people is that about a half an hour, right, is the time that people have bandwidth-wise at the end of the day. I know I just stopped sharing my screen because I am going to put the presentation into the chat, so you do all have access to it, and you can go ahead and share it with your spheres of influence. But one of the things we're going to really ask for people to do is that as you go through this year, as you come into different resources, as you have questions, as you see things that you wonder about, things that you need more support with, that we would just ask you to really reach out to us. In that last slide, we are doing a full day workshop here at PNW BOCES, 3rd grade deeper dive, which is going to look really extensively into the new materials. We will also follow up in the next few months with a virtual offering, which will be available to anyone across the state as well. And those are available for a nominal cost. The other thing that I would really encourage all of you, that if you are interested in learning more in a really constructed environment, all of our implementation trainings this year which are available on my learning plan, none of which are yet filled to capacity, will all lean into third grade and will show third grade resources, even if they're not third grade specific, because again, a lot of the materials that we've generated and built here really do correspond really nicely to the framework and to what New York State is pushing for us to be actively doing in social studies classrooms. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Again, all of the questions that you did share, we will put those together into an FAQ and send those out in the next listserv. So please be looking for that. And again, if at any time you ever have questions or wonderings, we really do encourage you to reach out to us. We are happy to work and partner one-on-one or with a school district or with a teacher to support success. And again, thank you for being here today. And we look forward to working with you. And the recording should be up on the website by the end of the week or the very beginning of the next week. So, and thank you all once again for being here.